Here's the update on the tomatoes. These are planted just 6 weeks ago. They're loaded. They're up over my head already. And there's just so many tomatoes in here. It's crazy. So we keep pruning, take all the leaves up, try and steer the plant towards producing more fruit. Hey everybody, and welcome. We are about to decapitate some tomato plants. I'm going to be going over in this video my technique for getting tomatoes ready for the high tunnel, but it's good to learn, even if you don't have a high tunnel or don't have a high tunnel yet, to learn these techniques because they're going to make you better at growing tomatoes on the whole. So there's still going to be some good stuff in here, even if you don't have a high tunnel. Stick with me. So at the farm that I've managed in the past, we had an entire high tunnel dedicated to indeterminate, which means they continue to vine all season, indeterminate heirloom tomatoes, and we made a lot of tomatoes, produced a lot. So in a tunnel, we would generally have about 300 plants in a 30-foot by 96-foot tunnel. Each plant would have 2 vines that would be trellised up throughout the growing season. And so about 600 vines of tomatoes, and it's a very intensive process. That is on like the far end of small scale farms. That's not usually what the home gardener is going to be doing. It's not what the hobbyist is going to be doing. But learning how to produce at that level of intensity and efficiency is going to make producing at a smaller scale that much easier and take that much less time, because you'll basically get more per square foot. So I want to help you get the most out of your tomatoes. You could apply some of these principles if you were growing outside, if you're trellising them and hard pruning them. I think Josh Satin has a trellis to make you jealous video that you could reference if you are hard pruning and trellising to single vines or 2 vines. A 2-liter system is what you'll call it. So you can check out that video and reference that if you are going to do this process outside on indeterminate tomatoes. So later in the video, you'll actually see the process from plants going into the ground to getting our first tomatoes. I hope that will help you, that timeline will help you think through this technique in reference to increasing your production efficiency. And so definitely stick around for later in the video to see kind of the end result. This technique is really geared towards someone who's doing a 2-liter system. So what that means is you're basically pruning this one plant into 2 vines. And tomato plants at each leaf, at each leaf joint, they'll produce a sucker. That sucker is going to turn into like a new branch. So what we're trying to do in hard pruning a tomato is basically make the plant focus on producing fruit rather than foliage, and rather than more and more side branches. We just want it to do 2 liters. I think it's typically 2 or 3 leaves and then a fruit cluster, 2 or 3 leaves and then a fruit cluster. And so we want high quality fruit. We want the plant to focus on fruit and get that fruit in a condensed, highly productive season. So what I found is doing the 2-liter system is good for growing in the South because our summers tend to be too hot to where we can't grow tomatoes all the way through August. Not without switching to a determinate heat tolerant variety like Grand Marshal. And so typically I grow my heirlooms, I'll plant them on the average last frost date. We'll probably be pulling them out at the end of July because they'll just start to not do as well in the summer heat. And at that time, our field tomatoes are coming on. Once those field tomatoes start, I can get my heirlooms out of the tunnel and get my fall crop ready and get the tunnel ready for a fall planting, maybe even overwintered flowers or something like that, where I'll continue to have production throughout the winter because that's high value real estate. So putting the energy for the one plant into 2 vines helps those vines grow a little more slowly. So by the time that they reach the top of the tunnel, it's about the time when the plant's wrapped up with production for the season anyways. So it's good, about 8 feet tall. I've done the lower and lean method, and what I found is like by the time you're lowering and leaning for a single vine, it's about wrapped up anyways. And so what I preferred to do was using compostable clips and compostable jute twine, to where at the end of the season I can just cut all those I'm not lowering and leaning anything. The plant climbs up the vine. Once it's at the top, we clip the top of the plant. Once the final fruit clusters are ripe, we just cut those strings and the whole tunnel gets cleaned out in one go. And it's really easy to clean up. Everything goes to the compost pile because everything's compostable. We're not trying to untangle things and unclip things. So that was a good method. What I'd done in the past too was using a sucker. After the vine began to grow, I used a sucker as a secondary leader. And what I found is that was usually a good place or a bad place where the plant would actually split because the weight starts to pull the plant apart. So I started doing this process, and this has really, really helped with that. The plants won't split. You're getting two vines that are of equal size and they're growing at the same rate. So it also makes pruning and all those things a little easier to where one half of the plant isn't a lot taller than the other. You can do both sides at the same time. And so every tomato plant, this one actually has 2 seeds, got double seeded. So I can still cut this guy off, and I'm actually gonna put it in a separate pot and let it root. And then I'll have a plant later. And then I can even do the same thing with the top once I cut it. So these are the cotyledons. Cotyledons are the embryonic leaves. That's what has all the resources to get the plant started. And then these are the true leaves. So in a lot of plants, they'll even drop their cotyledons. But what we're gonna do is take our scissors. We're gonna cut the top off that plant right below the true leaves and above the cotyledons. And this will look painful to beginning gardeners. And this one, I'm actually just gonna cut a little bit below the cotyledons because I'm gonna be transplanting the whole thing anyways. And so this is the top of the plant. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take off the biggest leaf because plants lose water through their leaves and gain water through their roots. And this doesn't have any roots, so it needs fewer leaves, otherwise it'll wilt. And then I'm just gonna stick this in potting soil. And so when I was managing the larger greenhouse and we'd have 300 of these little tops that I cut from my plant, this is gonna give me 2 liters now. So where each cotyledon is, a new stem is gonna grow. So I'll have a perfect V for this tomato plant. So I'll have 2 equally sized vines. It does set it back a little bit, so I'd probably build in an extra week worth of time ahead of when you wanna transplant. But then I have these tops, and in the way that I'm value adding these tops, again, I cut the biggest leaf off because they lose water through leaves, gain water through roots. There are no roots, so it needs some less leaves, and then I plant that guy. This is gonna root, and in a few weeks, it'll probably be this tall, and then I can sell it at a plant sale. Got my Whispering Willow bootstrap pots, and you could sell these for anywhere between $3 and Lowe's has them for $5 for a 4-inch pot for tomato plants right now. So if I had 300 plants and sold each of those for $4, it's $1,200 just from cutting the tops off the plants that I was gonna do anyways so I can get my double leader system. So this is my technique for decapitating tomatoes. It has really proven successful for me in the past. Jill and I at Whispering Willow are gonna be doing this on her high tunnel tomatoes. The field tomatoes we won't. We're actually probably we may do some indeterminates out in the field, but probably going to be the Grand Marshal heat setting, and then maybe some paste tomatoes in the fall. So there's stuff to put up for storage. Those are determinate varieties. They'll create a bush, big bushy plants that don't need this level of pruning. So this is just for hard pruning indeterminates to really help the plants focus on high quality, large, marketable tomatoes. So here's our little our little plant. So just shortly, in the next probably few days, I'll start to see 2 little buds forming at the joint of each cotyledon. You can almost actually see them now. And then those 2 stems should take off. I always do a few extra just in case one of the plants doesn't have a double stem. You could still let that one stem develop and then branch off the next sucker if you're trying this on a small scale or at home for the first year. Commercially, I just do extra, and then that way if I do have a plant that doesn't put off a second vine, only puts off one, I'll just sell that one at a plant sale or something like that, or and just focus on having 300 good, healthy starts that have the double leader system. This one's in a soil block, So you can start to see there's a little bit of roots coming through the bottom, just barely. But now that I've cut the top, it's gonna set it back a little bit. And so I can wait a little, maybe like another week for those 2 stems to start developing before I put this in a larger soil block. And then by April 15th, which is in zone 7B, is our average last frost date, somewhere around there. Then that's when it goes in the ground. Even though it's in a high tunnel, which is greater protection, I still wait till that frost date to where I don't have to worry about putting out row cover, even in the tunnel, or if someone accidentally leaves the sides up or, or something like that, it's protected. It's also warmer, which means it's gonna transplant a little bit easier. Another tip too, with these soil blocks that I really like doing is I actually plant them a little bit higher and then have my drip irrigation next to it. This just helps keep this soil that's like right around the stem of the plant a little more dry. And so it's less likely to have like fungal diseases and things like that. Also that drier soil is gonna deter things like slugs and things. So I actually transplant a lot of our plants in the greenhouse a little bit higher than normal. So I'll go ahead and show you kind of how this looks through the season. So I hope you enjoy. This is some clips from like previous years that I've grown, just kind of stitched together to give you that timeline for production. And so leave any questions you have in the comments below, and I'm happy to get to those as I can. And I'm trying to think if there's any other questions. Coming up, April 16th is our plant sale, Bell Urban Farm plant sale in Conway, Arkansas. And Jill and I are gonna be there. We're growing some cut flowers to go along with the cut flower course that we offer. So if you've taken the course and you wanna get flowers and you're local, you can actually pick up a lot of the flowers that we highlight in the course at the Bell Urban Farm plant sale. So we're excited to see you there, maybe. Maybe we'll even have some tomatoes from the tops that we're cutting off these plants. And yeah, happy gardening and good luck. So this is April 15th. Tomato plants are going in. The tomatoes we planted are already about knee high and wanting to get their second clip as we trellis them up these strings. Lots of flowers, as you can see, all the yellow, and our first tomatoes. All right, we spent all day clipping and trellising and pruning all these tomatoes. They are rocking and rolling. So many tomatoes. Trying to find a good cluster here. All right, we got a tomato update. They continue to reach for the sky and are taking a lot of time clipping and trellising. But they are producing tomatoes like crazy right now, and they're sizing up. You can see like how few leaves are on this plant, but look at how big the fruit clusters are. It's just crazy. So we're pruning off all the bottom leaves, so you can see the tomatoes that are forming. And this just helps increase the airflow and gets the tomato to put more of its energy towards fruit instead of leaves. Here's an update on the tomatoes. They are like 2 feet away from the top of the strings, and they are loaded with huge clusters of tomatoes. So we picked, the tomatoes are to the roof. They are doing really well this year. They slowed down a little bit past week or so because it got kind of cool. And by cool, I mean high 80s. But it'll be back into the high 90s soon. So commercially using high tunnels for tomato production, it would not be unheard of to get about $20,000 gross from tomatoes produced in a high tunnel. Even if you're not producing tomatoes commercially, using these techniques will help you be a better tomato grower. So I wish you the best of luck this season, and be sure to let me know any comments or questions below.